Okra is a staple in my garden and many southern gardens. I've been growing this particular variety of okra, Clemson Spineless, for over 10 years. I've been saving the seed each year, but I was thinking if I love okra so much, why limit myself to this one variety, as productive as it has been? This year I decided to have a little bit of fun and test out some different varieties of okra, which you can see right here. And what I've noticed is that there's a lot of variations between different varieties of okra, and I wanted to explore those differences and share them with you today. Before I share with you the unique heirloom varieties of okra that I planted this year, let's take a look at this open pollinated variety, Clemson Spineless. This is an okra that most of us grow, and if we've ever grown it before, we know we have to harvest it young or else it's gonna get really hard and not as tender. I picked this okra at its peak. We're gonna compare it to the other varieties and you'll be able to see the difference between how small you need to pick it, and then also a thing we're gonna talk about today, especially when we're comparing these varieties, is the goo factor. I hear it said that way. Mucilaginous, sliminess. It's the kind of thing that a lot of people don't like about okra, and the good news is the goo factor is different between varieties, and I'm going to share that with you once we get all of these picked. But let's go and take a look at these other varieties so we know what we're comparing to. As you can tell, there's a big difference in these 4 varieties of okra. But not only is there a difference in their growth habit, which you can definitely see, the taller ones versus the smaller ones, but there's difference in the fruit itself, how big they can grow before they start getting tough, and as I mentioned, what they are made of on the inside. So let's take a look at the first one down here. This one at the end is called the Burmese Okra. As you can see, the Burmese Okra is significantly smaller than the larger varieties that we're gonna get to next. Their height has definitely made this easier to harvest, especially when you're comparing to their taller counterparts. But that's not the reason I chose to grow this Burmese okra. These pods can get 9 to 12 inches and it's almost spineless, but the reason I was interested in these is because they can grow about 10 inches without getting tough. I found this to be absolutely true in being able to slice them for fried okra and roasting them. They stay tender for a lot longer. If you let a Clemson Spineless get this big, you'll be hard pressed to get a knife through it. It gets so tough. Another benefit of the Burmese okra is that it starts bearing when it's as small as 18 inches tall. So this might make it an ideal option for those of you who live in the north who may struggle growing okra. This may be a little bit better because it'll bear when it's a little bit shorter. This then may be an option for those of you who don't live in the deep south. You may struggle growing okra. It may never grow this tall. The Burmese might be an ideal option for you. Another thing about the Burmese that you might be interested in is that it is a little bit less gooey inside, which also makes it ideal for some of you who don't love the goo factor of okra. Moving along here, we have the Sherwood red okra. As you can see, it's already getting really tall. We're just at the early part of August, I guess, middle part of August when I'm filming this. I planted all of these, by the way, the early part of May, maybe the late part of April. The reason I chose the Sherwood red okra is because it's supposed to be the best tasting according to the seed catalog, and it's supposed to still be tender at about 9 inches long. So unlike Clemson Spineless, we can let these get just a little bit bigger. This may be pushing it. We'll see if this one's still tender at this size, but obviously a Clemson Spineless is gonna be really tough at this size. I have noticed though that this one does tend to get a little bit tougher quicker than a similar equivalent size of the Burmese. But another thing is this one is a little bit less gooey than the Clemson Spineless, so it may also be a good choice for you. Moving on from the Sherwood red okra is a variety that has a rich history called the Puerto Rico Everblush. I got this seed along with all the other seeds from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. Side note, if you're looking for a crop like okra, it's much better to choose a seed company that focuses on southern gardens. It's really hard to find this kind of variety in seed companies that are not necessarily focused on the south. But that's a whole side note. Now, while I chose this variety because it had this rich history, 50% of the seed sales go to the Utopian Seed Project. Another thing that attracted me to the Puerto Rican Everblush was that it's supposed to harvest early and then be very tasty, and it's supposed to be tender to about 6 inches. This one's a lot larger. We'll see how tender this is. It doesn't really feel like it's all that tough. I feel like I've been able to get these a little bit larger than normal, but we can go ahead and clip one that's younger also. This is another one that's purported to be a very tasty variety of okra, but I have to say, even the ones that are supposed to be fantastic tasting, I haven't noticed a huge difference. I usually just put them all together and I can't really tell a difference between the two. To me, all okra tastes amazing, but if you have a more sensitive palate and you can tell the difference between the okras, this may be fun for you to see the difference between the tastes. And then another interesting thing about the Puerto Rican Everblush is that, as you can see, some of them are blushing this sort of red color, but then others are still this pale green. That's just a part of the diversity of these seeds that I find really fascinating. Let's move on finally to our last variety of okra. This is called Gold Coast. I selected the Gold Coast variety because it has a very large root system and it's supposed to be more tolerant to root knot nematodes. Last year, I realized that a lot of the signs that I was finding in my okra plants, the lower leaves getting distorted and dying off, was likely the result of root knot nematodes. I pulled one of my okra plants out. I was able to confirm that. I knew then that I had the presence of root knot nematodes, so I decided to grow this variety that's supposed to be a little bit more resistant. Now, we're still not completely at the end of the season, so we'll see. But so far, I don't see any evidence of any major problem with root knot nematodes. The plant itself, as you can see, is more bushy, more branched. It's not as tall and skinny. That may or may not be a big deal for you, but let's talk about the quality of the okra pods themselves. The size of this okra is a little bit different. It's more of a thick type of okra pod, definitely compared to the other ones that we've seen today. But what I've noticed about these is that they do get tough really quick. Most likely this is already past its prime. So like the Clemson Spineless, it's really important to pick these okra pods when they are much smaller. I would probably pick these okra at no larger than about this size. So if you're wanting to pick okra every day, pick it small, pick it young, you like how picking okra young makes it a little bit more tender, this may be an option for you. Another thing that I've noticed is that if you do like the goo factor in okra, this is probably the slimiest okra I've ever tasted. I don't mind that. I actually find it nice. And then if you use okra in gumbos or anything that needs a little bit of a natural thickener, this would be a great option for you. And let's just say that this plant is gorgeous. I think this one and the Burmese are beautiful okra plants. But obviously you can just tell the difference between these. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the differences when we cut these open, because when I started cooking with them, I started realizing that not all okra is created equal. All right, so let's cut open these okra. Just for review, this is Clemson Spineless, Burmese, Sherwood Red, Puerto Rican Everblush, and Gold Coast. Let's start out with our regular Clemson Spineless. I'm gonna cut it here, very tender. And as you can see, this is your regular, normal okra sliced. I'm feeling a little bit of goo, nothing major. Next we have the Burmese. Let's go ahead and cut that off. You can see how tender that is, even at that long. I would say this is absolutely true. There's hardly any goo in this. It's slick, don't get me wrong, but it's not oozing out. And here we have the Sherwood Red. I'm thinking this might be a little tough, but we'll see. No, it actually isn't. Oh, it's kind of getting there. You kind of hear it. But still, that's not bad for a large okra for sure. Getting a little bit more goo out of that, not as much. Let's compare this smaller Sherwood Red just to see what we see in the difference here. You can just see it's a little bit less developed there. So if you're getting a young one, definitely more flesh in the young one. For me, this would be the ideal size for roasting just because you have more flesh here. This would do well in frying. Next we have the Puerto Rican Everblush. It's starting to get a little bit tough, still not terrible. You can see the difference here, very fleshy there. I'm gonna go pick a smaller one just to compare, like I did with the Sherwood Red. So this is another Puerto Rican Everblush, definitely more of an ideal size of an okra. The reason I chose these larger ones was just to demonstrate how much, if you've ever grown okra before, how much they stay tender longer than the Clemson Spineless does. But this is what the young Puerto Rican Everblush looks like. Still lots more flesh there. Even if we open it up, we still don't have a whole lot of goo, we got a lot of flesh there. And finally we have the Burmese. You can see a more developed seed system, more similar to the Clemson Spineless over here a little bit. And I can tell you when, you can kind of see the goo coming off here, faintly maybe, but when I'm cooking with this and I'm slicing it, very, very mucilaginous. So this, I would say, would probably be the gooeyest, even more so than Clemson Spineless, and especially more than these other three. I hope you've been able to tell that this has been such a fun experiment for me, especially since I just love okra. And I hope that if you grow okra in your garden, this gives you some options for the future. As I mentioned, all of these seeds are found in the Southern Exposure Seed Catalog, at least they were for this year. Maybe they do different varieties each year. But I encourage you, whether you're growing okra or something else that you love, branch out, try different varieties. You never know what you'll find, and you might just find a favorite that you never thought of. If you've tried different varieties of okra than the ones we talked about today, I would love for you to share those in the comments, because I'm always looking for new ideas for my future garden as well. And if you're wanting to save your okra seed for the future, if you have an open pollinated variety, this video will show you exactly how to do it.